Still working that entry-level job, sis? Sarah smirked across Mom's antique dining table. What was it again? Something in finance. I took a slow sip of wine, letting the irony wash over me. Entry-level. They only knew. Just pushing papers, I replied carefully. My position as the youngest ever chairperson of the Federal Financial Oversight Committee wasn't public knowledge yet. Tomorrow's announcement would change that. Mom bustled in with her signature pot roast. Sarah's company is expanding again, she beamed. Third merger this year. Really? I asked, knowing exactly which merger she meant. The paperwork had crossed my desk yesterday. Biggest deal in corporate history, my brother-in-law Tom boasted. Once it goes through next week, we'll be running the largest financial services company on the East Coast. If it goes through, I thought, fingering the unsigned approval documents in my briefcase. And what about you, Claire? Mom turned to me with that familiar mix of pity and disappointment. Still processing forms at that government office? Something like that. My phone buzzed. A message from my assistant. Urgent. Thompson-Bradley merger approval needed. All parties awaiting your signature. Sarah's merger. The one she'd been bragging about all evening. The one that needed my approval to proceed. Claire never did have your ambitions, Sarah, Mom sighed. Some people just aren't meant for big things. Another buzz. Ma'am, Treasury Secretary on line 1 regarding merger approval. Remember when she wanted to be CO? Sarah laughed. Now look, stuck in some boring government job while I'm making history. I checked my watch. In exactly 12 hours, my appointment would be announced. My face would be on every financial news channel. The mysterious new chairperson who'd been quietly reshaping federal financial policy. The merger announcement is tomorrow, Tom said proudly. Front page news. Sarah's moment to shine. My phone lit up again. Final reminder. Merger cannot proceed without your authorization. What do you think about the merger, Claire? Sarah asked condescendingly. Not that you'd understand the complexities, of course. I opened my briefcase slowly. Actually, I pulled out the approval documents. I understand perfectly. Oh, honey, Mom patted my hand. Don't try to pretend you understand Sarah's work. We know government filing clerks don't handle big corporate deals. I fought back a smile, thinking of the executive boardroom where I'd grilled Sarah Sue just yesterday. He hadn't known who I was either. Just saw a young woman in a power suit asking uncomfortably precise questions about his merger proposal. My phone buzzed again. A message from the Treasury Secretary himself. Need your decision on Thompson-Bradley. Markets opening in 14 hours. Tell me more about this merger, Sarah, I said, casually flipping through the documents. I'm particularly interested in the offshore holdings structure. Sarah's fork paused halfway to her mouth. How do you know about that? Just curious. I'd spent 6 months investigating those very holdings, finding irregularities that could sink the entire deal. Well, she recovered quickly, it's all very complicated. Way above your pay grade, little sis. Mom beamed at Sarah. My brilliant daughter making waves in the financial world while Claire. She sighed. At least you have job security, dear. Another message flashed. Ma'am, CNN wants to pre-record your statement about the merger decision. You know what your problem is, Claire? Sarah leaned forward. You never learned to think big. While I was planning corporate takeovers, you were content pushing papers in some government cubicle. If she only knew my office occupied the entire top floor of the Federal Financial Building, with a view that made her corner office look like that cubicle she imagined me in. Speaking of papers, I said carefully, how confident are you about tomorrow's announcement? 100%, Tom boasted. Everything's approved except some minor bureaucratic rubber stamp. Some government nobody has to sign off, but that's just formality. I almost choked on my wine. Government nobody. If they only knew that nobody was sitting right here deciding their fate. Claire, stop pestering your successful sister about business, Mom chided. Why don't you tell us about your new apartment instead? The one in the government housing complex? Sarah smirked. I thought about my penthouse overlooking the Capitol, paid for by the salary they thought was entry-level. My phone lit up again. Final deadline for merger approval, midnight. You know what? I stood up, gathering my things. I actually have some important papers to sign tonight. Oh honey, Mom said sympathetically. They're making you work late again? That's the problem with government jobs. No respect for family time. Something like that. I picked up my briefcase containing their merger's fate. Sarah, Tom, good luck with tomorrow's announcement. I have a feeling it'll be quite memorable. Thanks, sis, Sarah said dismissively. Though you might not read about it in the government newsletter. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed one last time. A message from my assistant. Ma'am, your official announcement is scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. All major networks will carry it live. I smiled, thinking of Sarah's face when she realized her nobody sister had been secretly running the most powerful financial oversight committee in the country. Tomorrow would definitely be memorable, just not the way they expected. The next morning, I arrived at my office at 7 a.m., watching the sun rise over the Capitol through floor-to-ceiling windows. My assistant, Michael, was already waiting with a stack of newspapers. They're running the merger announcement early, he reported. Your sister's company is very confident. I glanced at the headlines. Thomson-Bradley merger set to reshape financial sector, followed by a photo of Sarah beaming beside her suit. How confident? I asked, settling behind my mahogany desk. They've already printed the celebration banners. Your sister gave 3 morning show interviews. And he paused, checking his tablet. She just posted on LinkedIn. Proud to announce the biggest merger in corporate history. Some people push papers, others make history. Interesting timing, I mused, considering I haven't signed the approval yet. My private elevator chimed. The Treasury Secretary walked in looking anxious. Claire, we need your decision. The markets open in 2 hours and Thomson-Bradley is already making announcements. Are they? I pulled up Sarah's latest interview on my wall screen. There she was, glowing with presumed triumph. This merger represents years of hard work by people who think big, who aren't content with small government jobs. They're certainly confident, the secretary observed. Too confident. I opened the merger file on my desk. Did you review my findings on their offshore structures? Yes. The irregularities are concerning. My phone buzzed, a text from Mom. Watching Sarah on TV. So proud. Hope you're having a good day at your little office job. Another buzz. Sarah, don't worry, sis. Once the merger goes through, maybe I can get you a real job. Something above paper pushing. Michael cleared his throat. Ma'am, your official announcement starts in 90 minutes. The networks are setting up now. I stood, walking to the window. From here, I could see the Thomson-Bradley building, where Sarah would be holding court in her corner office, basking in premature glory. Pull up the merger approval document, I instructed Michael. He projected it onto the wall screen. One signature line waited at the bottom, mine. Also, I added, show me the regulatory investigation findings. A second document appeared, detailing months of investigation into Thomson-Bradley's questionable practices. The same investigation Sarah had dismissed as bureaucratic red tape. Your sister's company is hosting a breakfast celebration, Michael reported. They're live streaming it. I pulled up the stream. There was Sarah, champagne in hand, surrounded by cheering executives. To making history, she toasted. And to those smart enough to think big. The Treasury Secretary checked his watch. Claire, we need your decision. The markets. Actually, I smiled. I think I'll deliver my decision in person. In person. Michael, is my security detail ready? Yes, ma'am. And the press pool is assembled downstairs. I picked up my pen, but instead of signing the merger approval, I reached for a different document, one Sarah hadn't seen coming. Send a message to Thomson-Bradley, I instructed. Tell them the committee chair is arriving for an urgent announcement. They'll expect you to rubber stamp the merger, the secretary warned. They expect a lot of things, I replied, watching Sarah celebrate on the live stream. Time they learned who really runs this show. My phone buzzed again, Mom sending a group text. Watching my successful daughter change the financial world. Some people understand ambition. I straightened my jacket, checking my reflection. The same power suit I'd worn to grill Sarah's suit. Michael, is my car ready? Yes, ma'am. Full security detail and press pool standing by. Perfect. I gathered my files, not the merger approval but something far more interesting. Let's go crash my sister's party. The Thompson-Bradley lobby fell silent as I walked in, flanked by federal agents and trailing a pack of reporters. Through the glass walls of the conference room above, I could see Sarah mid-toast, oblivious to the commotion below. "Ma'am," the security guard stepped forward. "The celebration is private." "Federal Financial Oversight Committee," my lead agent announced, flashing his badge. "The chairperson needs to speak with your executives immediately." I watched the color drain from the guard's face as he realized who I was. The same reaction I'd been getting since my appointment, surprised that someone so young could hold so much power. "Of course, Ms. Wells," he stammered, using my professional name. "Right this way." As we rode the elevator to the executive floor, my phone buzzed with messages. "Mom, Sarah's celebration is on CNBC. Why aren't you at work?" "Sarah, watching me make history, sis? This is what real success looks like." The elevator doors opened to chaos. Executives rushed around with champagne flutes, reporters positioned their cameras, and in the center of it all, Sarah held court like a queen at her coronation. "And next quarter's projections after the merger," she was saying, then stopped as she noticed the sudden silence falling over the room. "Claire, what are you doing here? This is a private executive event." I stepped forward, my security detail creating a path through the stunned crowd. "Oh, I'm exactly where I need to be. If you're here to congratulate me," she smirked, "you could have just sent a card. Though I know government salaries don't allow for much." "Actually," I set my briefcase on the conference table, "I'm here on official business." "Official?" She laughed. "What, did they send you to file the merger paperwork?" The room had gone completely quiet now, all eyes darting between us. The CEO, recognizing me from yesterday's questioning, had turned an interesting shade of pale. "Not exactly." I nodded to Michael, who switched on the wall screens. My official government portrait appeared alongside my title, Claire Wells, Chairperson, Federal Financial Oversight Committee. Sarah's champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor. That's impossible," she whispered. "Is it?" I pulled out the merger documents. "Like these irregularities in your offshore accounts? The ones you thought nobody would notice. Those were approved by me." I smiled. "No, they weren't. In fact, nothing about this merger has been approved. Despite your premature celebration." The CEO stepped forward, sweating. "Ms. Wells, if we could discuss this privately." "Oh, but Sarah always says I think too small," I replied loudly. "So let's think big. Michael, please switch to the live feed." The screens changed to show every major news network, all carrying the same headline: Federal Oversight Chair to make announcement on Thompson-Bradley merger. "You see, Sarah," I continued, enjoying her growing horror, "while you were bragging about making history, I was making sure that history was legal." But you're just a government nobody," she stammered. "A nobody who holds the fate of your company in her hands." I opened my briefcase again, this time removing not an approval, but a different document entirely. "Who wants to read the investigation findings first?" The room erupted in chaos. Executives lunged for their phones, reporters started shouting questions, and Sarah just stood there, champagne soaking her designer shoes, staring at her little sister, who turned out to be not so little after all. My phone buzzed again. "Mom, watching the live coverage." "Claire? Is that you on CNBC?" "Mr. Thompson," I addressed the CEO, "perhaps you'd like to explain to your shareholders why you announced a merger without federal approval?" "We were assured," he began. "By whom?" "The government nobody." Sarah found her voice finally. "Claire, please. We can talk about this." "Now you want to talk?" I raised an eyebrow. What happened to pushing papers and thinking small? The screen switched to live market coverage. Thompson-Bradley stock was already plummeting on news of the investigation. "Michael," I called, "please distribute copies of our findings to the press." "And Sarah?" I turned to my sister, who had sunk into a chair. "Next time you host a celebration, make sure you have something to celebrate." "Wait," she called as I turned to leave. "You can't do this. I'm your sister." I paused at the door. "Actually, I'm the only one who can do this. That's why they call it oversight." As my security detail escorted me out, I heard the beginning of Sarah's world crashing down. Reporters shouting questions, executives demanding explanations, and the distinct sound of more champagne glasses hitting the floor. My phone buzzed one last time. Mom again. Claire, why didn't you tell us? I typed back a simple response. Some people push papers, Mom. Others make history. In the car heading back to my office, Michael showed me the updated headlines. Merger halted. Oversight chair reveals major irregularities. Thomson Bradley stock plunges as feds announce investigation. Claire Wells, the powerful government nobody, who brought down a financial giant. And my personal favorite, sibling rivalry meets federal oversight. How a paper pusher became the most powerful person in finance. Your sister is trying to call, Michael reported. Let her leave a message, I replied, watching Thomson Bradley's stock price continue to fall. I'm too busy pushing papers. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just proving them wrong, it's proving them wrong on national television with full federal authority and a security detail to back you up. After all, even government nobodies have their day.
The wedding invitation never came. I wasn't expecting one, not really, but its absence still stung. My mother's text message was almost worse than no communication at all. Oliver says you make everyone uncomfortable. It's better this way. His future in-laws are very important people. I stared at my phone, sitting in my small office at the back of Crystal Lake Resort. Through the window, I could see workers setting up for yet another luxury wedding. Ironically, my brother's wedding, though he had no idea. At 32, I was the black sheep of the Mitchell family. While my younger brother Oliver had followed our father's path into investment banking, I had chosen a different route. Throwing your life away, as my father liked to say, by going into hospitality management. You'll be serving drinks to real businessmen, Oliver had sneered when I took my first hotel job. Is that what you want? What they didn't know, what they had never bothered to learn, was that I had plans. Big plans. While they were busy looking down their noses at my service industry career, I was learning everything I could about luxury hospitality. Every job, from dishwasher to front desk to events coordinator, taught me something valuable. And now, 10 years later, I owned Crystal Lake Resort, the most exclusive wedding venue in 3 states. Not that my family knew. The purchase had been through a holding company, the paperwork carefully structured to keep my name private. As far as they knew, I was still working as an events manager at some lowly hotel. My assistant Sarah knocked on my door, interrupting my thoughts. Ms. Mitchell, your brother's fiancée is here for the final walkthrough. She's early. I smiled. Of course she is. Catherine Windsor doesn't wait for anyone, does she? Catherine was exactly the kind of woman my family would love. Old money, perfect pedigree, and a personality as warm as an iceberg. She had booked Crystal Lake Resort through her wedding planner, having never met the owner. Today would change that. Tell her I'll be right out, I said, straightening my designer suit. Oh, and Sarah, make sure all the contracts are ready. I watched through my office window as Catherine paced the lakeside pavilion, her Louboutin heels clicking on the marble tiles. She was pretty in that polished socialite way, all smooth edges and practiced grace. Her wedding planner, Miranda, hovered nearby with a tablet full of checklists. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of my office. Time to meet my future sister-in-law. Mrs. Windsor, I called out, using her preferred formal address despite her young age. Welcome to Crystal Lake Resort. I'm Elizabeth Mitchell, the owner. Catherine turned, her practiced smile freezing as she processed my last name. Mitchell. Any relation to? Oliver Mitchell. Yes, he's my brother. I watched the color drain from her perfect complexion. Though I understand I'm not invited to the wedding. Miranda, the wedding planner, nearly dropped her tablet. I don't understand. You're the owner. But the contracts were signed under Crystal Lake Holdings. A necessary business arrangement, I explained smoothly. Some clients might be uncomfortable knowing a woman my age owns their premium venue. Better to let them focus on the property's reputation rather than its owner. Catherine's fingers tightened around her Hermes bag. Does Oliver know that his embarrassing older sister owns his dream wedding venue? No, he doesn't. Not yet. You can't, she started, then caught herself. This is highly unprofessional. We have a contract. I pulled out a folder from my leather portfolio. About that contract, our legal team has discovered some concerning issues that need to be addressed. Issues? Miranda stepped forward, her face pale. Everything was reviewed by our lawyers. Yes, but they might have missed the clause about owner's discretion regarding venue services. I smiled, channeling Catherine's own brand of cold politeness. You see, as owner, I have final say over which events we accept. Catherine's composed facade cracked. You wouldn't dare. Do you know who my father is? Charles Windsor, CEO of Windsor Financial. Yes, I know, just like I know about the merger talks between Windsor Financial and my brother's firm. This wedding is as much business as pleasure, isn't it? She took a step back, her heel catching on the marble tile. What do you want? Want? Nothing. I just think it's time for a family reunion. A proper one. My phone buzzed, a text from Oliver. Catherine says you're causing problems. Back off or I'll have father deal with you. I laughed softly, showing the message to Catherine. Still running to daddy for everything, isn't he? Some things never change. Name your price, she said through gritted teeth. Everyone has one. I walked to the edge of the pavilion, looking out over the crystal clear lake that had given the resort its name. You know, my brother and my parents all think I'm a failure. They imagine me living in some cramped apartment, scraping by on tips and regret. The truth is, I've built something extraordinary here. The venue, Miranda started cautiously, it's booked solid for the next 3 years. The waiting list is incredible. Yes, it is. I turned back to Catherine. Your wedding is in 2 days. You've invited half of New York's financial elite. Canceling now would be embarrassing. Catherine's face had gone from pale to red. You vindictive by language, I cut her off. This is a classy establishment. Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Oliver and tell him to come here. Now, then we're all going to have a little chat about family, respect, and consequences. And if I refuse? I shrugged. Then I exercise my right to cancel your booking. I'm sure the plaza has an opening. Oh wait, they're booked through next year. The Pierre perhaps? Though their lake view isn't quite as spectacular. With trembling hands, Catherine pulled out her phone. I heard Oliver answer on the first ring. Baby, what's wrong? Has she threatened you? You need to come to the venue, Catherine said, her voice tight. Now, and bring your parents. I sat in my office, watching through the window as Oliver's black Mercedes pulled into the parking lot. He stepped out, looking exactly as I remembered, perfectly tailored suit, carefully styled hair, and an expression of entitled anger. Our parents emerged from their car moments later, mother in her signature pearls, father with his perpetual frown. Sarah appeared at my door. They're asking for the owner. Rather forcefully, I might add. Let them stew for a few minutes, I replied, enjoying the sight of my family pacing anxiously by the lakeside. Sometimes anticipation is the best revenge. Through the window, I could see Oliver trying to comfort Catherine, while our parents spoke in angry whispers. Father kept gesturing at the resort, probably calculating its value and wondering how his failure of a daughter could possibly be connected to such a prestigious property. Finally, I stood up, smoothed my suit, and picked up a thick folder of documents. Showtime. As I stepped out onto the pavilion, the look on their faces made the last 10 years of dismissal and disdain almost worth it. Almost. Hello, family, I said quietly. Welcome to my establishment. Shall we discuss the wedding? The silence that followed my greeting was deafening. My father was the first to recover, his face turning that familiar shade of purple I remembered from childhood confrontations. What is the meaning of this? He demanded. Where is the owner? You're looking at her, I replied calmly, watching his expression shift from anger to disbelief. Crystal Lake Resort is my property, has been for the past 3 years. Oliver stepped forward, pulling Catherine behind him protectively. Impossible. You can't afford a place like this. You're just an event manager. I smiled. Was an event manager. Now I own the most exclusive wedding venue in the tri-state area. Funny how perceptions can be deceiving, isn't it? Elizabeth, my mother cut in, her voice sharp with disapproval. If this is some kind of joke. Oh, it's no joke. I opened my folder and began distributing documents. Here are the ownership papers, profit statements for the last 3 years, and of course, Oliver and Catherine's wedding contract. My father snatched the papers, his hands shaking as he scanned them. I saw the exact moment he realized everything was real. His eyes widened, and for the first time in my life, he looked at me with something other than disappointment. How? He whispered. Remember that worthless inheritance from Grandma Rose? The one you all laughed at because it was just her old lake house. I gestured to the resort around us. I had a vision for this property that none of you could see. While you were busy mocking my career choices, I was learning every aspect of the hospitality industry, making connections, building a reputation. The lake house, my mother murmured. But the renovations, the expansion. All funded by my work and smart investments. Turns out the hospitality industry can be quite profitable when you understand it. But you never bothered to ask, did you? Too busy bragging about Oliver's latest promotion or Catherine's family connections. Catherine stepped forward, her composure cracking. What do you want? Money? Recognition? I laughed softly. Money? I made $3 million in profit last year. Recognition? The resort was just featured in Luxury Venues magazine. No, what I want is something much simpler. I want you all to understand exactly what you've done. And what's that? Oliver sneered, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. You excluded me from your wedding because you thought I was an embarrassment. You were ashamed of my career. My choice is my life. And now? I spread my arms wide, encompassing the pristine grounds, the elegant pavilion, the crystal clear lake. Now you're begging to celebrate your perfect day at my establishment. We'll find another venue, my father declared, but his voice lacked conviction. 2 days before the wedding, with half of Wall Street's elite on the guest list, I shook my head. Good luck with that. Besides, what would you tell them? That you had to change venues because the owner is your embarrassing daughter. The color drained from Oliver's face. He understood the implications, the whispers, the questions, the potential impact on his carefully cultivated image. Name your price, he said through gritted teeth. My price? I pretended to consider. How about an apology, a real one, from all of you, for years of condescension, dismissal, and shame? You're blackmailing us, Catherine accused. No, I'm teaching you a lesson about judgment and consequences. You see, I could cancel your booking right now. The contract gives me that right, but I'm not going to do that. They all stared at me, confused. Instead, I'm going to give you exactly what you wanted, the perfect wedding at the perfect venue. And during the reception, when everyone is commenting on how beautiful everything is, you'll have to live with the knowledge that your embarrassing sister made it all possible. My mother stepped forward, her eyes wet with tears that I wasn't sure were genuine. Elizabeth, sweetheart, we never met. Yes, you did. I cut her off. You meant every dismissive comment, every excluded invitation, every moment of shame. But that's okay, because while you were all busy looking down on me, I was building something extraordinary. I turned to Sarah, who had been quietly observing. Please show the wedding planner to the bridal suite. We need to review the final arrangements. Wait, Oliver called as I started to walk away. That's it. You're just going to let the wedding proceed? I stopped and turned back. Of course, I'm a professional after all. The wedding will be perfect. Every detail exactly as planned. And every time you look at your wedding photos, every time you remember your special day, you'll have to remember that it happened here, at your failure of a sister's resort. The next 2 days passed in a blur of activity. True to my word, I ensured everything was flawless. The flowers were pristine, the catering exquisite, the service impeccable. I stayed in my office during the ceremony, watching through the window as Oliver and Catherine exchanged vows under the lakeside pergola. During the reception, I finally emerged, dressed in a designer gown that cost more than Oliver's first car, as circulated among the guests. Many of them knew me, not as Oliver's sister, but as the owner of Crystal Lake Resort. The looks on my family's faces as they watched Wall Street executives and society matrons greet me warmly were worth every moment of past pain. Elizabeth, Charles Windsor, Catherine's father, approached with a champagne flute in hand. I had no idea you were Oliver's sister. We must discuss hosting our annual charity gala here. I smiled graciously. Of course, Mr. Windsor. My team would be delighted to help coordinate that. From across the room, I saw my father watching the interaction, his expression a mixture of shock and dawning realization. He was finally seeing me as I truly was, not the failure he had imagined, but a successful businesswoman in her own right. Later that evening, as the party was winding down, Oliver found me by the lake. You could have canceled everything, he said quietly, made us all look like fools. Why didn't you? I sipped my champagne, looking out over the moonlit water. Because I'm not like you, Oliver. I don't mean to tear others down to feel successful. My revenge isn't ruining your wedding, it's making it so perfect that you'll never be able to forget who made it happen. He was quiet for a long moment, I underestimated you. We all did. Yes, you did. And that was your mistake, not mine. The next morning, I sat in my office reviewing the wedding photos our staff photographer had taken. Every image was perfect, the venue stunning, the couple radiant, the guests clearly impressed. At the bottom of the stack was a photo I hadn't expected, my parents standing by the lake, looking up at the resort with expressions of regret. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "We were wrong about you, about everything. Can we talk?" I looked out at the lake, thinking about forgiveness, about family, about the difference between revenge and redemption. Then I typed my reply. "Brunch on Sunday. We can start there." A week later, I received a letter from Catherine. Inside was a check for the wedding costs and a note. "You could have ruined everything. Instead, you showed us what real class looks like. Thank you for giving us a perfect day, even though we didn't deserve it." I framed both the note and the check, hanging them in my office as a reminder that sometimes the best revenge isn't about destruction. It's about rising so far above others' expectations that they have no choice but to look up to you. Crystal Lake Resort continued to thrive. My family, slowly and somewhat awkwardly, began to rebuild their relationship with me. Oliver and Catherine became regular visitors, eventually hosting their first anniversary party at the resort. My parents started bragging about their entrepreneurial daughter to anyone who would listen. But I never forgot those years of dismissal and exclusion. They had shaped me, driven me, made me work harder and reach higher than I might have otherwise. In the end, their lack of faith in me had given me the greatest gift of all, the determination to prove them wrong. Now, when I interview potential employees, I always ask them about their dreams, their goals, their vision for the future. And when they tell me to listen, really listen, because I know that sometimes the people others underestimate are the ones who will amaze you the most. I always knew Uncle Frank would try to steal our family business. Even as a child, I saw the way he looked at my father's success. The barely concealed envy whenever Dad announced another record quarter. What I didn't know was how far he'd go or how thoroughly I'd make him regret it. Martinez Construction had been my father's life's work. He built it from a single truck and a toolbox into a $50 million company that handled major contracts across 3 states. While Uncle Frank spent his time chasing get-rich-quick schemes and complaining about his bad luck, Dad was laying foundations, both literal and metaphorical. "Your father got all the breaks," Uncle Frank would tell me at family gatherings, bourbon in hand. "Must be nice to be the golden boy." He never mentioned how Dad had worked 18-hour days while Frank was borrowing money for his latest failed investment. I grew up on construction sites, learning every aspect of the business. By 16, I could read blueprints better than most project managers. At 22, fresh out of business school, I was managing my first development project. But to Uncle Frank and his sons, my cousins Michael and Peter, I was just little Isabella, playing at being a contractor. They didn't know I was also quietly earning my MBA at night, studying finance and corporate law while they assumed I was just Dad's spoiled daughter learning a family business. Then came the heart attack. I found Dad in his office late one night, slumped over quarterly reports. The doctors called it a warning sign, his body demanding he slow down. He needed rest, rehabilitation, time away from the stress of running a major construction company. That's when Uncle Frank made his move. "We need to discuss the future of Martinez Construction," he announced at the emergency family meeting, barely 2 days after Dad was released from the hospital. The conference room felt smaller than usual, cramped with tension and unspoken agendas. I sat quietly, watching Frank position himself at the head of the table, Dad's seat. My mother, still exhausted from hospital vigils, looked uncertain. My older brother Alex, who had never shown any interest in construction beyond his guaranteed paycheck, was texting under the table. "Carlos," Frank addressed my father, who sat pale but alert in a corner chair, "you need to think about succession, about strong leadership during your recovery." His pause made it clear he didn't expect much recovery to happen. "The business is fine," Dad started to say, but Frank cut him off. "Is it? Fourth quarter projections are down. The Riverside project is behind schedule. The Sullivan contract is shaky." He spread his hands on the polished conference table. "The company needs experienced leadership, someone who understands the industry, who has connections." "Like you?" I couldn't help asking. The sarcasm in my voice made my cousin shift uncomfortably. Frank's smile was cold. Actually, yes. I've already spoken to several board members. They agree changes need to be made. You what? My mother's voice cracked with disbelief. It's just business, Frank said smoothly. Nothing personal. But let's be realistic. Carlos needs time to recover. Alex has his own interests. He glanced at my brother, who had finally looked up from his phone. And Isabella. Well, this isn't the kind of business a young woman should have to worry about. The room erupted in overlapping voices. My mother was crying. Alex was demanding to know what connections Frank had actually made. My cousins were smirking, already imagining their new positions of power. I stayed silent, watching Dad. His face had gone gray again, but his eyes met mine. In that look, I saw something that broke my heart, fear. Not for himself, but for the company he'd built, for the hundreds of employees who depended on it, for the legacy he'd worked so hard to create. I have the proxy votes, Frank announced, his voice cutting through the chaos. By this time next week, I'll be CEO of Martinez Construction. Don't worry, family will still be taken care of. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Small salaries, of course, nothing excessive. We'll need to cut costs. Dad started to stand, but I put a hand on his shoulder. When's the shareholder meeting? I asked quietly. Friday, 10 a.m., Frank replied, looking surprised I even asked. Though it's really just a formality at this point. I nodded, already pulling out my phone. Thank you, Uncle Frank. That's very helpful. Isabella, he said condescendingly, I know this is upsetting, but business is business. You'll understand someday. I looked up from my phone and smiled. Oh, I understand business perfectly, Uncle Frank. Better than you think. The next 3 days were a blur of activity, most of it carefully hidden from my family's view. While Frank was measuring Dad's office for new furniture, I was in meetings he knew nothing about. While my cousins were planning their new executive positions, I was making calls that would change everything. Wednesday night, my phone rang. It was Mr. Chen from the investment firm. It's done, he said simply. The paperwork will be ready tomorrow morning. I thanked him and hung up, staring at the spreadsheet on my laptop. 6 months of careful planning, of quiet investments and strategic moves, all leading to this moment. I'd seen Frank's takeover attempt coming long before Dad's heart attack. I just hadn't expected to have to move so quickly. Thursday morning, I visited Dad in his home office. He was reviewing project files, still trying to keep things running despite doctor's orders to rest. Papa, I said softly, do you trust me? He looked up, his eyes tired but still sharp. With my life, Maija. You know that. I placed a folder on his desk. Then I need you to sign these, and I need you to not ask questions until tomorrow's meeting. He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded and reached for his pen. That night, Uncle Frank called. His voice was smug, practically dripping with false sympathy. Isabella, sweetheart, I hope there are no hard feelings about tomorrow. Change is hard, I know, but it's for the best. I'll make sure you keep your project manager position, with supervision, of course. That's very thoughtful, Uncle Frank, I replied, watching the city lights from my apartment window. I look forward to tomorrow's meeting. It should be educational. That's the spirit. See, business doesn't have to be ugly. I hung up and poured myself a glass of wine, thinking about the look that would be on his face in less than 12 hours. Friday morning, I dressed carefully in my sharpest suit, the one I usually saved for major client meetings. The boardroom was already full when I arrived. Frank and his sons near the head of the table, board members and major shareholders filling the other seats. Dad sat quietly in the corner, Mom beside him holding his hand. Frank stood, spreading his arms like a conductor about to begin a symphony. Thank you all for coming. As you know, recent events have made it clear that Martinez Construction needs new leadership. I have here the proxy votes. He started reaching for his briefcase. Actually, Uncle Frank, I interrupted. Before you continue, I think we should review the current shareholder structure. He frowned. That's unnecessary. I have the votes. The votes you arranged last week? I smiled, pulling out my own folder. Those were based on outdated information. Maybe we should discuss who actually owns Martinez Construction now. The boardroom fell silent as I opened my folder and began distributing documents to each person at the table. Uncle Frank's face flickered between confusion and annoyance. What is this? he demanded, snatching up his copy. "The current shareholder register of Martinez Construction," I replied calmly. "Updated as of yesterday. You'll notice some significant changes." Frank's eyes scanned the document. I watched as his expression shifted from irritation to disbelief to something close to panic. His hands began to shake. This is impossible," he stammered. "Is something wrong, Uncle Frank?" I asked innocently. "You seem surprised that someone else might understand how to acquire controlling interest in a company." Michael, my cousin, grabbed the paper from his father's hands. "What the hell? Where did these shares come from?" I stood up, commanding the room's attention. "Let me explain. For the past 6 months, I've been quietly buying shares through various investment vehicles. Some from minor shareholders, some through carefully structured deals with investment firms. As of yesterday morning, I control 51% of Martinez Construction." The boardroom erupted. Board members were flipping through the documents, verifying the numbers. My mother was staring at me with her mouth open. Dad was smiling. "You can't do this," Frank shouted, his face turning red. "These transactions weren't approved." Actually, I picked up another document. They were all perfectly legal. "You see, Uncle Frank, while you were busy courting board members with golf games and expensive dinners, I was studying securities law and corporate governance. Every purchase was properly registered, every transaction documented." Peter, my other cousin, jumped to his feet. "This is a trick. She's bluffing." I nodded to Mr. Chen, who had been sitting quietly in the corner. He stood and introduced himself to the room. "I represent Kingston Investment Partners. We can confirm that all transactions listed are legitimate and properly recorded." Frank slumped in his chair, the reality of the situation finally hitting him. All his careful planning, all of his backroom deals, undone by the niece he'd never taken seriously. But you're just a project manager," he whispered. "No, Uncle Frank. I'm a project manager with an MBA in corporate finance and enough business sense to see your takeover attempt coming months ago." I turned to address the entire room. "I know some of you supported my uncle's bid for control, believing he could provide stronger leadership during my father's recovery. Let me tell you what his actual plan was." I clicked a remote, and documents appeared on the boardroom screen. These are records of shell companies Frank has been setting up. He planned to divert contracts to these entities, essentially stealing business from Martinez Construction while extracting maximum profit for himself. He would have stripped this company bare within a year. The board members began murmuring angrily. Frank's face had gone from red to white. "You've been investigating me," he choked out. "Of course. Did you really think I wouldn't protect my father's legacy?" I turned to my cousins. "Michael, Peter, you might want to distance yourselves from your father's activities. The SEC tends to frown on corporate fraud schemes." I scrambled away from Frank as if he were contagious. "Now," I continued, "let's discuss the future of Martinez Construction. Dad needs time to recover, that much is true. But this company doesn't need new ownership. It needs experienced leadership that understands both the industry and modern business practices." I walked to the head of the table, my father's seat, never Frank's. As majority shareholder, I'm appointing myself CEO, effective immediately. Dad will serve as chairman of the board, providing strategic guidance while focusing on his health. "You?" Frank laughed desperately. "You're too young, too inexperienced. I'm 28 years old," I cut him off. "The same age Dad was when he founded this company. I've worked every position from laborer to project manager. I have an MBA from Northwestern and 6 years of hands-on experience. But most importantly, I have something you never had, Uncle Frank, genuine love for this company and everything it stands for." I turned to the board members. "You've all received my 5-year strategic plan. It includes expansion into green building technologies, modernization of our project management systems, and a profit-sharing program for long-term employees. Any questions?" The room was silent. Then old Mr. Sullivan, our longest-serving board member, started to clap. Others joined in, the applause growing until it filled the room. Through tears, I saw my mother beaming with pride and Dad giving me a subtle thumbs up. "This meeting is adjourned," I announced. "Uncle Frank, security will escort you out. Don't worry about cleaning out your office, we already have." As Frank was led away, still protesting, Dad walked up and hugged me tight. "You knew," he whispered, "about Frank's plan?" "For months. I've been preparing for this since I first noticed him quietly buying shares last year. No, Dad smiled. I mean, you knew I gave you those first shares when you were 16, not just as a gift, but as a test. To see if you'd understand their value, if you'd learn how to use them wisely. I hugged him back. Of course I knew, Papa. You taught me that everything in business is a lesson, if you're smart enough to learn from it. The next few weeks were intense. I implemented the changes I'd planned, modernizing systems that had grown outdated, introducing new technologies that would keep us competitive. Some old guard managers resigned, uncomfortable with taking orders from a young woman. I replaced them with talented professionals who cared more about competence than gender or age. Uncle Frank tried to fight back, threatening lawsuits and claiming family betrayal. But his own paper trail of planned fraud killed any sympathy he might have found. His social media rants about his ungrateful niece only made him look more pathetic. 3 months later, I sat in my office, previously Dad's office, reviewing quarterly reports. Our numbers were up 25% from the previous year. The Riverside project was back on schedule. The Sullivan contract was secure, and we had just won the biggest green building contract in the company's history. A knock on my door interrupted my work. It was Alex, my brother, looking uncharacteristically serious. "Hey sis," he said, shifting uncomfortably. "Got a minute?" "For you?" "Always." He sat down, fiddling with his expensive watch. "I've been thinking, maybe it's time I actually learned the business. Not just collecting a paycheck, but really understanding it. Think you could teach me?" I smiled, remembering all the times he'd mocked my dedication to learning every aspect of construction. "Start Monday, 6 a.m. sharp. Wear work boots." He groaned but nodded. "Thanks, Isabella. And I'm sorry I never took you seriously before. What you did, it was amazing." "It wasn't amazing," I corrected him. "It was business. But if you're willing to learn, really learn. I'll teach you everything Dad taught me, and a few things I figured out on my own." That evening, I visited Dad at home. He was looking better, the color back in his face, the spark back in his eyes. We sat in his garden, sharing a bottle of wine. "I got a call from Frank's wife today," he said. "He's taken a job as a sales manager at a small construction supply company in Nevada." I sipped my wine. "Good, far away from here. You know, when I started this company, I dreamed of passing it on to my children. I just never expected that your daughter would end up running it," I teased. "That either of my children would love it as much as I do," he corrected me. "But you proved me wrong. You didn't just save the company from Frank, you made it better." I looked at my father, the man who had taught me everything about business and life, who had trusted me with his legacy even when others doubted. "No, Papa," I said softly, "we made it better. We always were a good team." He raised his glass. "To Martinez Construction, past, present, and future." I clinked my glass against his. "To family, the real kind, the ones who build you up instead of tear you down." The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere out there, Uncle Frank was probably still cursing my name, still believing he deserved what I'd earned. But that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was sitting right here, a father and daughter who had built something remarkable together, who understood that true success comes not from scheming and betrayal, but from hard work, integrity, and the courage to stand up for what's right. Martinez Construction wasn't just a company anymore. It was proof that sometimes the best person for the job isn't the loudest or the most confident, but the one who quietly prepares, who learns everything they can, who takes nothing for granted. And sometimes, just sometimes, they're the person nobody saw coming until it was too late.